interrupt your conversation. It's always great to hear everybody talking. After the presentation, the nurse will still be here taking blood pressures if you'd like in the paoli room, so please do make use of that. The Christmas parade, I have to put a plug in for that. Will be Saturday. The weather looks great, so you don't have to decorate your car to be in it. You can just drive around with everybody. It's loads of fun. The fire truck with Santa on it will be here. And we'll have a cookie and hot chocolate and coffee table down where the parade forms. So if you'd like to come, that part's a lot of fun too, because that's where we do all the judging. That's where you get to see everybody up close. And some years we have great costumes. And there are a few of you in here that I see now that come to the parade and actually participate in the parade. And I hope that John Paul's going to do it again this year, because he had a very unique costume last year. The best, I would say. And so we did want to encourage you all to come out. So now let's get to the topic of the day. So I know you guys came out for the free food as well. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Sherry Kane. My husband Joe Kane is sitting here with the camera, and we are the co-chairs of the Hershey's Mill Technology Committee. And as most of you know, we bring a lot of events to Hershey's Mill. And this one just sounded too intriguing to pass up. So you remember the farm stand? Who here went to the farm stand that was in the golf club parking lot? This is the same group. This is IBX. They sponsor these events, and we really appreciate the things that they do. The farm stand is great. If we didn't go this year, we have to go next year because it's really fun. This event today is Dr. Neil Patel on aging successfully. And he is with the Patina Group. It's a very unique way of practicing medicine. And he'll be telling you a little bit more about that. But I'm going to introduce Dr. Patel. He has an amazing background, and when I was talking to him, I told him, I said, I don't think I can remember all that. But he grew up in New Jersey, went to medical school in Boston, started practicing. He has practiced around the world. He's done a lot of global work. When he got to that point where it was time for family, he had to settle down. So he came back to us, which is great, because he has a very unique viewpoint on medicine. He is a family practitioner, so that means that he covers all age ranges, and specializing pretty much in seniors now. So we want to welcome Dr. Patel, and at the end, this goodie bag has great stuff for us in it, so be sure to grab one. Dr. Patel.
Thank you, Sherry. Hi, everyone. Hi. Nice to meet you. I'm so honored to be here. What a great room. First, thank you, Sherry and Bill. And I know you may or may not have stepped off of a plane in the early morning hours. Appreciate the invitation and the camera work and everything else. Although Bill assures me he didn't invite me to share. He just does the camera work. And I hope everyone got some coffee and some breakfast. My name is Dr. Neil Patel. As Sherry mentioned, I'm a family physician. If you're comfortable, feel free to call me Neil or Dr. Neil or whatever you like. I'm here to talk to you all about aging successfully, which I think is a wonderful topic. Although, I feel humbled. I feel humble and humbled being asked to present about aging successfully. Now, I am a physician, so that means I studied a lot, and I have had 20 years in practice. Over that 20 years, I've really focused my practice, my professional work, on taking care of people who are 65 and older. So, at Patina, which is my medical practice, we've got patients ranging from the age of 65 to, any guesses?
100.
How old are they? I heard 100, 110, 110,
I go 100.
107, we're guessing. 108. Our oldest patient, bless her, is 108 years old. And so our practice focuses on people who are 65 and older, which sounds like a focus, it sounds a little bit like a specialty, and you would think I would know a thing or two about aging successfully. But I feel really humble standing here because I have that expertise as a physician, of course, and a physician who specializes in folks who are this age. But I wonder if that's my qualification. My other qualification is that I'm the only physician in my family. And so that means that, and I'm the youngest of all my cousins. My parents immigrated, so they had me late. So all of my cousins are older than me, meaning my aunts and uncles are over 65, right? So when anyone needs any help in my family, across this great country, whose phone do you think it is that dings or rings or goes off? It's mine. So that's my other qualification, is that I support lots of my family members, especially my aunts and uncles who are over 65. But still, I feel humble. I'm here to speak to all of you about aging successfully. But meanwhile, I'm 45. What do I know about aging successfully? I made it this far. I'll take some credit for that. But as I look around the room, and frankly, as I drove up, and I entered your community, and I saw the clubhouse, and I made my way down to the park. I didn't want to take up any parking, so I parked down by the tennis courts and the pickleball down the hill. It occurred to me that I should be asking you all on how to age successfully. You know, as I came into this room and I saw you all grabbing your food, grabbing your coffee, but more than anything else, I saw you talking to each other. Sherry had a hard time getting everyone to hush, didn't she? Because there's so much conversation, there's so much community, there's communion happening. I'm here to learn from you as much as I am to explain to you anything about aging successfully. And I really mean that. This seems like a wonderful place. And if you're in the room and we're sharing breath and you've made it to this place and you've been able to join with friends and community for breakfast, let me just start by saying you all seem to me that you are aging quite successfully. So I'll start there. So that said, you know, I am a doctor, I'm an expert. I don't think I'll get invited back if I don't say something about aging successfully. So why don't we strike a balance? Why don't we strike a balance by you all telling me what it means to you to age successfully? What are the things that you are most proud of when you think to yourself, when you look around and you identify what it looks like to age successfully? What are the things that matter most to you all? What are the things that maybe you know matter most, but you're challenged by? Or your friends, your family, your community is challenged by? And if you guys can help me understand what it means to you to age successfully, what I'll do is explain as a doctor, as a nephew, as a son, I'll explain to you how I've seen people manage those challenges. And what I've seen people who do age successfully in those regards, what I've seen them do, and how I've seen them sort of thread that needle as we all get older. Would that be a good way to lead the conversation? Yeah? That would require a little bit of interaction, though. And Bill's made it very clear that I have to stand up here behind this camera, so I'm going to do that. But I'm going to ask you all to think a little bit. What does it mean to age successfully? I'm going to ask you to think, what matters most? Right? What matters most to you? What matters most to your community? And then I'll hear some stories from you, hopefully, of what that means, but I'll share some stories of my own, of what I've seen in my patients, what I've seen in my practice, what the textbooks say, what the experts are saying about those different things that matter most to you when you think about aging successfully. Okay?
Do you want hands?
Yeah. Hands fall out. What's your name, please?
Susan.
Susan, what do you think? What matters most to you about aging successfully?
Well, matters most and issues are two separate things, but matters most is being able to be mobile. Then the challenge is being mobile. So, yeah.
You hear anything in?
Susan Mojavarian.
Susan goes right to an issue that's at the heart of it for so many of us. Frankly, at all ages, but particularly as we get older, which is mobility. What matters most to Susan, and I bet to many, many, many of you, is mobility. And that's also a challenge. Some of us, as we age, find that we're moving differently. Some of us, and I want to separate aging from being sick. These are two separate things. There are some of us, as we age, we find ourselves managing different illnesses that affect our mobility. And some of us notice that mobility starts to get to the heart of what it means to be successful. Is that what you mean? Yeah? Yes?
I think keeping active socially.
Keep-
This social
Keeping
Moment.
active socially. Your name, please?
Pat.
Pat? To Pat, one of the things that matters most to age successfully is to keep a social life. To feel, maybe I'll expand on that to what that might mean to me, to feel fulfilled by our community, to have interactions, to feel valued by others, and to engage, to be social. We're humans, we're social animals. So there's mobility, there's being social. What are some other things that matter most to you all? Aging successfully. Yes, ma'am.
Sandra, of being active mentally.
Wow. Sandra points out that what matters most to her is to be active mentally, to stay sharp. What do you do to stay active mentally?
I play mahjong and Scrabble.
Mahjong and Scrabble. Wonderful. Wonderful. And I see a connection too, because Mahjong and Scrabble are not games you can play by yourself, are they? Right? And honestly, there's a connection with mobility as well. By living in a community like this, where you all can live together, near each other, makes it easier to attend that Mahjong game, I suppose, right? Many Mahjong games, right? And to get around. So mobility connects with social, connects with staying active mentally. Other things? Yes, ma'am.
So my name also is Pat. Like many, I'm a solo ager. So having good health to maintain my independence is key.
Wow. Pat. Pat, what matters most to you, Pat, is to be independent.
Yep.
Particularly as a solo ager. As you can understand, but all of us, whether we're aging alone or in partnership with a spouse, a husband or wife, a sister or brother, staying independent, right? And this is a theme that I hear all the time from folks, which, as you don't need me to point out, connects with all these things that we're hearing. You have to be mobile to be independent. You have to be cognitively or mentally strong and active and maintain. I think you have to have a social tapestry. Most of us do. There's some hermits in the crowd probably, but most of us need to have a social sort of health and environment in order to feel independent and strong. So staying well and staying independent is really important to many of my patients, certainly. And certainly it's something that I value myself. Yes, sir.
Nick, being active physically, going to the gym, swimming, track, lifting weights.
Wow.
Those kind of-
So Nick is an athlete. What Nick values is staying active, not just mentally, but physically. And he's already thrown out some things that I bet Nick does. He swims maybe, or many of you attend the gym. You must have a gym here in the community. No gym.
Walking trails.
Walking trails, that's a way to stay active. And I see tennis courts, there's certainly a pool out there that's nicely closed up for the winter. And there's ways around here that you find yourself able to stay active physically to maintain independence. Some of those activities probably have social elements as well. Other things, yes, ma'am?
Being positive all the time, rather than complaining. Being positive, I think that adds a lot.
Being positive, yes, right.
Just be happy.
Be happy.
Look at sunrise. It's beautiful.
So what matters to you is to stay positive, to be happy, to find things.
Rather than saying, oh, it's cloudy today.
That's right. That's right. I think we all understand that. I think we all understand what you're saying. Ma'am, your name? I didn't catch your name. find that, yes, if we're feeling positive, if we're finding things in our lives to be happy about, to appreciate, we feel good. We feel successful that day. We're aging successfully. And I bet most of us can admit that that's not always easy to do, right? Particularly as we age. Particularly
I
as
will.
maybe chronic illnesses creep up, or mobility feels threatened, or it becomes harder to be social, or we feel like we're solo agers. Sometimes it's harder to feel positive. Some of us find that our mood goes up and down sometimes, right? It's like these are important things to think about when we're doing our own plan, how I can age successfully, if we keep in mind our well-being, our mood, our positivity, like you mentioned. It's a great,
Being grateful
being grateful.
for what you have.
Being grateful. We're just coming off of my favorite holiday of the year, of Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. This year we hosted, we had about 18 people in the home, my family, some friends in town whose plans fell through came by. We had the big turkey, we had stuffing, we had green bean casserole, but the best thing at the table, my 13-year-old daughter took little pieces of paper, and she rolled them up, and she tied them together with some twine. Everyone got one at their place, and we all went around, and there was a question about what you're grateful for. A different question. Name something that starts with the letter G that you're grateful for. Or, name a person at the table with you that you're grateful for and why. Things like that. And what a wonderful way to start dinner, right? To really practice gratitude. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it's about one thing, just gratitude. I really appreciate that answer. That's an important part of aging successfully, at least for you, I think for many of us. Great. So, I'm curious to hear more ideas over time, but let's talk about some of those things, right? Let's talk about mobility as something that matters most. Let's talk about what sometimes we in the field will call mentation, or staying active mentally and healthy mentally. Let's talk about some of these things and how, as a physician, I see these issues come up every day, and how we help people to manage their mobility, manage their mentation, manage to achieve what matters most to them. So, maybe I'll find that simple stories can sometimes get a point across better than a sort of a lecture or something like that. So I'll tell you about a woman who lives not far from here. We're in new practice. I've been practicing for 20 years in family medicine, and in the last sort of 5 years really focused on people who are 65 and older. But this practice is a new practice that we started in 2022. Actually, the day we opened our doors to patients was February 22nd, 2022, which is 2/22/22, which is a fun day. I'll be honest, building a practice is not the easiest sort of practice. It's a little easier to take a job somewhere, easier to join a practice. But we started a practice, my colleagues and I, and we were ready. Everything was set up on 2/21/22. That was a Monday. But we decided, let's just take an extra day because it'll be so much more memorable if we open up our practice on 2/22/22. But it was around March of 22 when I met a patient who was having some mobility, I was going to say mobility issues, but let me back up. When I asked her what matters most, she didn't say mobility, but she said a few things that made me think about mobility. And then when we talked, we uncovered an issue that had to do with the mobility. I'm going to call her Ruth. That's not her name, but we think about privacy a lot in medicine in my practice. So I'll call her Ruth, and she lives in Chester County. And Ruth, when we asked her, what matters most to you? Her initial reaction was actually a little different than your reaction. I asked you guys, and right away hands shot up. So I appreciate that about this group. When we asked her, she sort of scratched her head. She probably hadn't really been asked that in a medical visit before. So it took her a minute to really think and understand. She was ready to ask about refills. She was ready to ask about lab tests and things like that, because that's what people think about a lot when they meet with me. But before we got into that, I said, hey, what matters most? So she took a beat. She took a breath. She thought about it. She told me she lives in a community a little bit like this one. And one thing that matters most to her is that she still drives. And that she's able to take her neighbors who don't drive to their medical appointments. It was really interesting that she went there, because that's not about her, is it? It's not her medical appointments. It was her neighbor's medical appointments. And remember, she didn't say mobility, but the fact that she has her car and she maintains her ability to drive. Driving herself didn't matter most to her, but driving her neighbors did. Isn't that something? That told me so much about her in that very first visit. We were actually on video for that visit. And sometimes you think that on video things will be a little bit less personal because we're not in the same room. But what I found was by asking the right questions, we were able to have this really deep conversation. I learned right away, in the first few minutes of meeting her, that she's a giving person, right? That she's grateful for the ability to help. She does value social. And then by driving her neighbors around to their medical appointments, she felt fulfilled. She felt independent. She felt she was aging, successful. Now there's more to the story than that. So we went on and we were talking about it, and it turns out that she was having shoulder pain. The reason why her shoulder pain made it to the top of her list wasn't because she doesn't have other pain, right? As a woman, she's probably 70 years old, if I think, in that range. Most of us will be, by the time we're 70, we're no strangers to pain. Maybe it's the shoulder, maybe it's the knee, the hip. Something acts up on a different day, right? So why shoulder pain? It's because she was finding that her shoulder pain was keeping her from driving comfortably. Right? That hand-over-hand steering that we all learned when we were 16. Something about turning that wheel was causing that tweak right here. And it wasn't stopping her, but it put into perspective what she might lose if this shoulder pain wasn't managed or getting better. Right? So what matters most to her was being helpful to her community. And her shoulder pain was putting that in threat. Right? That is very motivating to me. Because it wasn't about her shoulder only. There's half a dozen tendons in here. There's 4 big muscles that control the shoulder. There's the rotator cuff. There's cartilage. There's a chapter about this thick in the textbook about what can go wrong in the shoulder. And I'm trained to understand those things, examine for those things, order imaging so we can understand what those are. I'm trained to refer to the right sort of specialist sometimes, or to give an injection for that shoulder. But what was most important was how this shoulder was affecting her ability to be well, to age successfully, right? So we'll fast forward a little bit. So we said, okay, this is the top of your agenda, this is the top of mine. We're gonna work on her shoulder. Now we're over video, so I wasn't able to examine her shoulder right away. But I asked her to move it around a little bit. She showed me, I got a sense of what might be going on. A few days later, we were in her home. And at Patina, we don't have a traditional office. We visit the home, and a nurse named Kathy was visiting her. And she had a list of things that I had discussed by video that I wanted her to check out, including the shoulder exam. I also knew that she used a walker just recently, and it wasn't her walker, it was her late mother's walker that had been sort of hanging out in the closet for a few years since her mother passed away. And so recently, she also had some hip issues, and she started to use the walker a little bit. Kathy noticed something really interesting, because she was in the home, and she asked her, hey, let me see that walker. Ruth's mother was a lot taller than Ruth. And so her walker was adjusted a little bit too high. Now, if you're trying to lean on a walker and take a little bit of load off of your hips and your knees, but it's too high, what happens? It's your shoulder, right? So she was finding herself straining a little bit. So as we were thinking about her physical therapy, which she had already been engaged with from her last primary, as we were thinking about whether any imaging or x-rays or MRIs would be helpful, as we were thinking about what exactly was going on in her shoulder, we realized that in an effort to be more mobile, she was hurting her shoulder. And you know, some of you have these kinds of things at home where you've seen these as little pins that you push in and you push the feet up and you can adjust the height of that walker. And it's very, very simple. Kathy can do this in her sleep probably, but she said, okay, well, let's see, adjust the walker. She pushed the pin in and she said, well, let's try this for now. And I'll let Dr. Patel know what we found and we'll make a plan. And she left the home. And a week and a half later, I called Ruth to talk more about her shoulder. And what did she tell me? She said, doctor, don't worry about my shoulder. She found that just by that little adjustment, that her shoulder wasn't all better, but it was no longer the thing that mattered most to her, right? She found that, hey, it's getting a little better with physical therapy. I think I'm on track. I don't think it's going to keep me from driving anymore. And frankly, when I need a little break, my walker's really helpful. I'm able to get to the clubhouse and all these things without straining my shoulder. And everything turned out. Just I think of this example because as you guys were explaining what matters most to you, we sort of connect something, starting with mobility, right? But it also is a reminder to me about how when we let our patients guide us and tell us what's most important, and we take the time to listen and visit the home and just take a breath, that sometimes the solutions are these really simple things, right? It turns out for her, she didn't have to go to the MRI and spend that money as well as the inconvenience. And if any of us have been in an MRI machine before, it's not a pleasant experience. You're laying there and just banging at it. She didn't need that, right? She was ready to do that. She was ready for injections. She had mentioned that. She was ready to see a surgeon maybe, right? Now imagine that. Somebody's willing to let somebody cut open their shoulder and tinker around. But she didn't need that. She needed that walker to be fixed, right? So it's a kind of an interesting example of how a lot of medicine needs to be advanced and modern. We use medicines, we use technology that we didn't have 10 years ago. There's things that I do in my practice today that didn't exist when I was in medical school, believe it or not, in just 20 short years. But we shouldn't forget the simple things, right? And I'm always humbled by how my patients help me find those simple solutions. They know what to do. Maybe it's on the tip of their tongue. Sometimes, we say geriatrics. Sherry's father was one of the pioneers of geriatrics as a field of medicine. There's a saying that the geriatricians teach, which is, don't just do something, stand there. Sometimes we say, don't just stand there and do something, right? Don't just stand there and do something, right? But sometimes we have to, don't just do something, stand there, listen, observe, ask, right? And in Ruth's case, taking that more slow, patient, thoughtful approach, we were able to make a couple really important observations, and it really helped her. And that really did help her mobility, and it really did help her feel grateful for her sort of social environment and context. Any thoughts based on Ruth's story? I saw some hands going up as I was telling the story too. If there's any reactions or thoughts or questions you have about her.
Just want to give credit to the nurse.
Credit to the nurse.
I just want to say.
All the credit to the
I
nurse.
mean, yes.
That's right. That's true. Any nurses in the room?
Yes.
How did I know? We also have nurse Nina in the back, who's my trusted partner in nursing. That's right. Well, listen, part of the humbling experience of being a doctor is learning
Give credit.
how to give credit where credit's due
Yes.
and how to get out of the way a little bit. And how to really appreciate the tradition of nursing, which is very different than the tradition of medicine, isn't it?
Holistic, look at the environment, change what you can in the environment, yes.
Holistic.
Yes. Very
Look at the environment and change what you can about the environment. When we think of nurses and the history of nursing, we think about, at least in the popular history, Florence Nightingale. We think about the nurse who was there for you when you maybe were discharged from the hospital, who came to your home. You think about the nurse who was there at the bedside of the hospital. It's a very specific tradition. Some of the best physicians and nurse practitioners I've had the pleasure of working with and learning from started off as nurses. I didn't. Right? I started off behind. I had to catch up a bit because there's something about the tradition of nursing that is really rooted. You said it well. Be holistic. Think about the whole environment. Make some observations get the environment to suit the patient's need. Whereas physicians, to play out a stereotype, we're a little bit more like a hammer.
Well, you're looking,
We just
looking
let
at
it
body
out.
parts.
We're looking at body
Versus
parts.
looking at the entire
That's right.
environment in it, the entire person.
That's right. So when we started this practice, one reason why we started over is because we wanted to make sure that we really, not just upheld, but promoted that nursing perspective, that tradition of nursing in our practice. Because it is very clear to me that that is exactly what my patients need. And the loved ones of my patients and partner with me need. They need as much nursing as they need medicine. And so my job is to make sure that we ask the right questions and put the right people in a position to help each other. And many of you who support each other in the home are operating as nurses, right, nursing assistants, and you have a perspective on what it might be like. So, yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah.
And don't forget the physical therapist, I have a couple more additions.
Physical therapist. That's right, that's right. Well, you bring up a good point in healthcare. We've all had some really good experiences in healthcare, I suppose. I won't make you show hands, we probably have some not so good experiences in healthcare, but we see a lot of different people in healthcare, right? So show of hands, how many of us have sort of more than one medical professional that they see on a regular basis? More than one. Yeah. Nearly everybody, right? And they may be different specialists, they may be some nurses, physical therapists. Some of my favorite people are the occupational therapists out there, depending on your need, who can really be helpful. What else? What are some other sort of professionals that you've had positive experiences with that really helped you? Acupuncturists, sure. So,
More and more you see nurse practitioners.
nurse practitioners, combining sort of nursing with medicine, that's right. Chiropractors can be helpful, that's right. There's a lot out there. Our patients, when they join Bettina, remember, we only treat folks who are 65 and older. And so by the time you're 65, or 85, or 108, you've got a specialist or two. You've got a nurse or two. You've seen a few nurse practitioners. You've had a few physical therapists, right? How many of you feel like between all of those different professionals that are helping you, that they're working together as one team?
That's ideal.
That's ideal. Does anyone feel like if, well, let me ask it the other way.
Hospice
Yeah.
care.
Hospice care is a good team. Ma'am?
Well, you said working together, I raised my hand because I'm in Penn Medicine.
You're at Penn Medicine and you feel like they work together. Good, good. How many of you ask the opposite question? How many of you feel like you've got a great clinician here and an expert over there, but they don't seem to be talking to each other? Yeah, I think more hands going up. Unfortunately, that's the norm, right? And of course, we have a lot of empathy for these clinicians, right? Because, you know, somebody works in this office and somebody else works in that office. You see them hurriedly punching away at the computer during your visit, but they've got to write their notes, and when do they have time to call the other? When does a physical therapist have a chance to call the specialist? And when does the one specialist who's dealing with the shoulder have a chance to call the other specialist who's dealing with the kidneys or the eyes or something like that, right? So as we've recognized that there's different expertise out there, and we're so lucky to live here in the Philadelphia area, right? You know, people from around the world will fly to Philadelphia for healthcare. This is as good as it gets in some ways. But sometimes I feel like my patients and my family are sort of drowning in a sea of help. They've got Medicare. Maybe they've got a Medicare Advantage plan. They've got specialists. They've got physical therapists, right? If they're lucky, they drive, or they have someone to drive them to these places. So they've got all this help, but somehow it feels like they're underwater, right? So one thing that we find that's critical to aging successfully, one thing that we find is critical to achieving what matters most to each individual, is to coordinate all of that together. So if any sports fans in the room who are coming up on some important sports, you need a quarterback sometimes, right? You can't just have all the different positions running around. Someone's got to be at the center, making things work. Who would that person be? Who's the best person to to pull it all together and make sure that anyone who has more than one expert on their team, those experts are working together. Yes?
It's our family primary care.
Your family primary can play that role. That's right. That's right. Who else? So,
I think it's different than that. I think whether they're in the pension system or mainline health, I think that's the system. All the doctors are in that computer system, those web portals, and they're connected. They ought to be reviewing all your records together. They ought to be looking it over. I think it's like holding company,
yeah.
mainline health. I think that's the most important thing because they each have all these patients, and you ever go in their offices, they got records. Unbelievable what they got. But if it's not connected with a big system like Penn Medicine or mainline health, they have no prayer.
Yeah.
They're not calling the other doctor. They're not trying to call the other doctor to talk, but if they can see the information and they're not using the computer, shame on them.
Yeah.
They should be. They're forcing us to. They ought to be using it.
Right. So, and for those of you who couldn't hear it, one of the greatest things in healthcare that's very humbling is that two people can be right. So I think we have two correct answers. That it could be the family physician or the primary who coordinates things together. And the other gentleman suggested that it can be the system. You know, by having a computer that's shared, by being able to read each other's notes and things like that, that can serve to tie things together and pull it all. You also pointed out with a lot of empathy, you know, we're all thinking about, things are changing slowly as we go digital, but we all remember what it looks like to walk into a doctor's office and see that wall of manila folders, right? And I just realized that folks are busy, right? There's a lot going on just in my one practice. Well, how am I supposed to find time to coordinate with the other practice that has their own manila folders? I'll tell you, my first job in healthcare at age 16. At age 16, you can have a job, right? Without breaking any child labor laws. And so, but you need to, in New Jersey at least, across the river, you need to have working papers. So a doctor has to check you out and sign off and says, yep, the 16-year-old good to work. So I took a job at the local Kmart. Kmart's gone now. You guys remember Kmart?
Yes.
Yeah. And they hired me in the electronics department. And this is the technology. I'm invited by the technology committee, right, Bill? So you can understand, for me at age 16, I was excited that they wanted to hire me in the technology department. This is back when the Discman had just come out, the portable CD player. And I was really excited to be able to sort of sell these things and play with them behind the counter. But I didn't have working papers. And I was 16. I was at the age I was too old for my pediatrician. But I didn't have like a primary yet. I was pretty healthy. But my friend told me, hey, go see my mom. My mom's a pediatrician. She'll sign your papers. So I went in on a Monday morning and saw my friend's mom, and she said, yeah, great. You know, she listened to my heart and lungs, and she did her thing, and she's about to fill out the form, and she says, hey, this is for work. Where do you get to work? I said, I'm going to work at Kmart. She said, do you want to work at Kmart? I said, yeah, I want to work at Kmart because I'm going to sell these portable CD players. It's going to be fun. I'm going to be able to like play with them and learn about them. And then she looked at me. She put her pen down. She put the chart down. Do you want to work at Kmart? And before I could answer, she said, you don't want to work at Kmart. She said, you want to work for me. And so my job became to organize all those manila folders on that wall. So I understand.
Kmart sound better.
Kmart sounds better, right? Although, who knows what I'd be today if I had started selling those things. But it's funny, I learned at a very young age about those medical records that you pointed out and how important it is that those records are organized and clear. I learned very early what happens when somebody takes sort of the chart for this is a pediatric practice, say McDonald, and puts it in the D section next to Donald. And then when that kid has a sore throat and comes in, the whole office is in a tizzy. You can't find the chart. And that was my job to make sure that everything got put in the right place and things like that. It's really, really critical that we get some of the basic things right so that we can coordinate care. I also learned from this wonderful doctor, Dr. Vijay, how much she thought about her patients when they were seeing specialists. That she didn't see it as the end of her responsibility, when her patient saw a specialist or saw a physical therapist. She almost saw it as the beginning of her responsibility to make sure that the advice given made sense to her, that matched what the parents were looking for. Fast forward many, many years, one thing that I've learned, I keep saying humbling, but it's very humbling to treat adults 65 and older, because what the textbook says maybe applies to a healthy 35-year-old. The textbook will say things like, if this, then that, right? If these symptoms and these labs, then you prescribe this medicine, or you order this test. But when you're 65, you're 85, you're 105, sometimes what matters most to you becomes more important than the textbook, right? So we have to take a step back, and we have to coordinate, and we have to make sure that we understand values and preferences, not just as a physician, but as individuals. Remember, when I asked Ruth what matters most, she didn't know, she had to think about it. So it's really important to age successfully. You know, I should be giving advice because I'm here to speak. My advice to you would be, account for that. Think about what matters most to you. Think about your values and preferences. Because there's not always a right answer or a wrong answer. It really depends on what you value. Are you somebody who's a solo ager who lives alone? Are you somebody who has a lot of support? Are you somebody who drives or doesn't drive? These things don't show up in the textbook, but oh boy, it really should influence a good medical plan or a care plan. And it's up to us to think about those things and account for them. It's up to us to make sure that our primary care physician or our specialist understands that we've done that thinking and that we deserve care that's tailored to our values and our preferences. It's up to me to ask that question, but I'll confess, that's something that isn't normal. How many of us have been asked by our physician, what matters most to you? What are your values and preferences? You know, I'm not taking a lot of hands.
Not even a nurse practitioner.
Maybe not a nurse practitioner, right? Or sometimes a nurse will ask that, or a nurse will sort of ferret it out, right? But even nurses, we're thinking so much about that wall of manila charts. Or these days, that wall's gone, but there's a computer. And so while you're all out here, if I really want to put on my best doctor impression, what would I be doing? I'd be taking over here. And it's not because physicians and physical therapists don't like to talk to patients, right? We all could have worked at Kmart if we wanted to. We like to talk to people, but we're stuck in our computers. So if you aren't aware of what matters most to you and able to assert that and share that, or find somebody who won't let you get away with it, who's going to ask, then how can your care plan be really tailored to aging successfully for you as an individual? So that's a thought I have, you know, whether it's mobility or meditation or something else. What matters most to you and your values, your goals, your preferences is absolutely the bedrock of aging successfully. And you should do that accounting and ask that question to yourself. Yes, sir.
When you started to talk about coordination, somebody who's not mentioned, the pharmacist.
Yes.
I mean, these days, not so much as when you had the guy at the corner. Now it's, you know, two big companies and they're working with his own. But, you know, I take a lot of different medications. And I don't think that individual doctors are really looking at those interactions. Where do you see the role of the pharmacist?
Your name, sir?
Gary.
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 Gary makes a really good point, which is what about the medications? What about the pharmacist? And Gary, you're mentioning sort of an older style of pharmacy where you had a local pharmacist who was very much part of the community, who knew her patients, right? And knew her patients' kids and uncles, and everyone sort of went to the same pharmacy in the community. I actually still see an independent pharmacist. That's my preference. Although, if I was taking 5 or 10 or 15 medications, I might switch to mail order or something like that, right? Because it can be so much more convenient. More than 7.
We're not supposed to be on more than 7 medications.
But the nurse is telling us we should be on more than 7 medications. But I would make you raise your hands, but how many of us are on more than 7 medications? So many of us, right? So we talked about meditation. We talked about mobility. We talked about what matters most. These are M's. Medications, mobility, meditation, and what matters most. But medications is something that you just brought up now. That's the other M. So I think about, I'm a very simple guy, so I like to have mnemonics. So when I see patients, I'm thinking about these M's. I'm thinking about their medications. Because you know what the truth is, that whether you have 2 doctors or 20, let's assume that they're not really communicating that much with each other. Where it all comes together sometimes is that medication list, doesn't it? Where it all comes together literally in the pill box. I had a chance to meet with a new friend in North Carolina who was describing helping support his mother-in-law. And he painted a picture for me. He said, she sits down in the morning and his wife, her daughter, will set up the pills in a pill box. But she's got this giant pill box with little flaps and little doors. And once in a while, she'll sit down in the morning and she'll say, I'm going crazy. This is too much. I think of my own father. He passed away on New Year's Day, January 1st of 2021. Remember 2020? What a year. He made it through 2020. That was his thing. He died comfortably at home. This is what he wanted. I'm very proud of how he made his exit. But as he was getting older in his last year, he started losing weight. And we were trying to get him to eat more. And he would smile at me and say, look at all these pills I take every morning. It's filling, that's half my belly is filled right there. Right? Our kidneys and our liver are charged with the task of handling all those medicines. And when we study those medicines, we don't study them taken 7 or 10 at a time. We study them 1 at a time when we do our research. So what happens in the real body when you're taking one drug and another drug and another drug prescribed by 3-4 different people? It's a really critical issue. One thing that I'm very proud of in my practice, because we specialize in folks who are older, we think a lot about medications. We think a lot about that number 7. 7 drugs or less is ideal. And we measure things. So I can tell you that we did a measure a few months back. This requires looking chart by chart and counting our fingers sometimes until our software gets more advanced. But 25%, a quarter of our patients had at least one medicine taken away after their first few visits. With their permission, of course, because we ask people, which of these medicines is helping you, which ones make you feel bad? And it's when you ask, it's very easy. So we noticed that just within the first visit or 2, about a quarter of our patients found themselves taking less medicine. And I think, as a result, some of them woke up feeling more energetic. They got out of bed and they didn't really feel quite as dizzy as they were before. We've had patients who were taking a medicine for depression who finally stopped. And they'll come back and say, Doc, I don't think I was ever depressed. I think it was the medicine that was making me feel a little bit slow, right? We love, I had to practice, I used to practice in Las Vegas, Nevada, with the Hotel Workers Union. We had a little practice right on the strip across from the Stratosphere, if anyone's been in the Stratosphere. And we had a break room with cabinets, and we would put those little orange bottles. When our patients would say, yeah, I'm done with that drug, thank you, doctor, for taking that away. We knew that if they took it home, it would end up in their cabinet and would confuse things. So we'd say, do you mind if we just dispose of this? And they'd say, sure. So we, dispose of the medicine properly, and we peel the label off so their name wasn't on there anymore. And we would start stacking those orange bottles on top of our cabinet in our break room. And after 6 months, there's this beautiful wall of orange that we just celebrate every morning. We felt really good and proud. It's so easy to prescribe. It's a little harder to de-prescribe. But to your point, sir, if we keep adding medicine, even each medicine is maybe a good idea, something is lost, right, when we're taking so many. And the pharmacist can't keep track anymore. And people get sick. They go on medication there because of the result. So absolutely, what matters most to many of you is all the medications. And so all of these should be consideration. How can we take just the right amount of medicine, no more than less? Right? Yes, sir.
I think you have to be an advocate for yourself when you're picking up your drugs, because the primary is sometimes he forgets to, I'll give you an example. That Paxlovid, he just prescribes that for COVID. And then I asked the question of the pharmacist, the reaction with these other medicines. They said, oh no, you can't take Paxlovid. And then I called my primary and said, oh, okay. So I think it's best to ask the pharmacist when you're picking up your drug, what are the reactions? Because they know.
Yeah.
The primary, I think he's sometimes too busy. He's not
That's
thinking
right.
about interactions with those drugs.
Yeah. Remind me your name?
Bill.
Bill, for those who didn't hear Bill, and as I answer this question, remind me in the back, how many doing on time here? It's 10:06. I don't want to keep you guys from your mahjong. Got 10 minutes or so. So, you make a good point that you have to advocate for yourself and ask the pharmacist. It sounds like you had an experience where you were prescribed a drug, in this case Paxlovid. Paxlovid, for those of you who haven't followed the news, it was all the rage about a year ago. It is really the best drug we have against COVID. It's a pill. You take it for about 5 days. But it's like all medicine, it's not perfect, right? All medicine has effects and beneficial effects, but they also have side effects, right? And so you make a good point that a lot of times people aren't accounting for all the other medicines that are in your body as they make a decision. We have another patient, I'll tell another story. This is a couple. He's about 68, she's about 65. I remember that because at the tail end of their careers, they're both working, they began to imagine retirement and save a little money for their big trip, right? They wanted to take a big trip. And so when she turned 65 and retired, they made a trip. They took a river cruise through Europe. I've never taken a river cruise. Anyone taken a river cruise in Europe? God bless you, yes. It's on my list now, the things I want to do. It was a Saturday. At least, I don't know what the time zone was there, but it was Saturday here in Philadelphia. One thing that we do as a practice is we are available 24/7 because the body doesn't wait to get sick for my office to open up on a Monday morning. And the way we do that to avoid it being a burden, remember I mentioned a 13-year-old, I've got two more, I've got an 11-year-old, and my 6-year-old is going to turn 7 in just a few days. So we take turns. In the group, we have 2 physicians and 4 nurse practitioners. And so that's 6. So every 6th week, one of us takes a turn from Thursday to Thursday, just keeping our phone on all night. Make sure it's plugged in next to the bed, make sure that ringer is loud. So that if heaven forbid somebody needs something overnight or on the weekend, we're available. So this couple actually hadn't met them before. They were being treated by one of my colleagues. But my phone rang about, maybe 2 p.m. on a Saturday. And it was this couple. And they were in Frankfurt, Germany. They were in Frankfurt, Germany, and they just come off of their river cruise, and they were staying in a hotel. And I don't know if I got all the details of whether they get back on the cruise ship, was it a short thing or what have you. But what happened was on the riverboat, they both started getting a little tickle in their throat, a little sore throat. No big deal. They skipped the extra glass of wine at dinner. They tried to get some more rest. They tried to stay hydrated. The second day, it started to feel a little bit better. On the third day, or maybe the fourth day, they got off the boat and they got to their hotel. They opened up their bags, and Mr. in the couple remembered, the top part of your bag where you tuck things in and hide them away. He remembered that they had put some COVID tests in there before they left, right? Just in case. And they said, "Oh, we had the sore throat. We're mostly feeling better, but let's see." So they did the test, 2 of them, in the bathroom of the hotel in Frankfurt. Any guesses how many lines showed up on that COVID test? 2 lines positive. They're both positive for COVID, right? So here you are. Can you imagine this? You're taking this trip of a lifetime after retirement. You're in your hotel in Frankfurt. Is there urgent care in Frankfurt? Is my insurance going to cover it? So they were a little confused, but being members of the practice, we assured them that we're available, so they just called. They picked up the phone. Turns out the phone works these days overseas as well. And who did they get in their line? They got this guy. So we were able to talk it over, and we were able to talk about Paxlovid, which is why I remember this couple. We were able to talk about the pros and cons. It turns out that the cholesterol medicine that Mrs. was taking was one that doesn't play nice with Paxlovid. And so you have to stop one and then restart it. It also turns out that Paxlovid, if you study the data, works really well if you take it early. But if you wait too many days, it doesn't really work that well. So now you're going to get side effects without a lot of benefit. And most importantly, they were feeling better. They were feeling better. Already, before they took their test, right? Just a few days went by, they forgot they had the test. They weren't thinking about it. So here's this couple, holed up in a hotel, feeling better, taking other medicines that might not play nicely with this treatment. And so we had a conversation, and they decided with me, we call it a shared decision. We made a shared decision that they didn't need Paxlovid. So they didn't need to go to the emergency department or find a doctor. they didn't need to find out how does the pharmacy, or I think they call chemists in Europe, right? How does a chemist work? Is Paxlovid even available? In this country, it's covered. I believe it's free, and that's changing soon. But in Europe, what's the policy? I didn't know. But we didn't have to stress about that, because for that couple, it wasn't the right treatment anyway. And they were able to learn that on a Saturday morning just by having a phone call with their primary care office. And I was able to access all the records, instantly. So we helped them make a nice decision. And again, don't just do something, stand there. It turns out in this case, we were able to think holistically, like my nursing colleague was telling me to do, and we were able to find out from the patient how they're really feeling, take our time, and it turns out they didn't need medicine. So all that complex science and all that insurance stuff really didn't matter. What mattered is that they were feeling well. So instead we talked about how they can protect others on the cruise, and talked about masking, and they made a plan, and they finished the trip, and still had a wonderful vacation, because they were, remember, they're feeling better on it. So it was a nice example of what it means when patients are able to access expertise that is holistic, that's thinking about all the medications as well as all their conditions, and helping them to make decisions for themselves. Another couple would have made a very different decision, and that's okay, because it's about the individual. Other thoughts, other questions? What matters most as we age successfully? Yes, sir.
Having good financial advisors.
Financial advisors. Oh boy. Hey, I don't remember her name from a minute ago. Nick cares about the gym and he cares about money. He's the most practical man in the room. That's right. Having, we talk about mobility, and mobility requires driving sometimes. It requires a car payment sometimes. There's money involved. We talk about being independent. Sometimes that means living in a place where you can remain independent. Sometimes that costs money, right? So absolutely. Sometimes I think as medicine has thought deeply about all the different organs, we know so much about these eyes, right? We know so much about the heart. It's incredible. We know so much about the liver. We can biopsy the kidneys. We can biopsy the skin. Who's biopsying the wallet? Right? And so something that is critically important to me and to my entire team, we talk about this all the time. We talk about financial barriers. And we don't think that's different than medicine. That's very much part of medicine. Because the best treatment that somebody can't afford is not a good treatment. Isn't that right? And if your treatments are costing you so much that you're not able to take care of yourself and be able to enjoy, well, then that's not a very good treatment either. So when we start with questions like what matters most, then we have to be curious about the finances. We have to be curious about how does this all come together. And we find ourselves most proud of some of the ways we help people to save money, right? In fact, I mentioned when a quarter of my patients are taking less medicine than they were when they got here, that's less coping for each of them too, right? So that's a few more bucks in their pocket. So by planning ahead, by thinking about aging successfully, we can think about how we can afford to age successfully and make sure it all comes together nicely. It's a really, really good point. I talked about the M's, right? So we covered mobility, we covered mentation, we covered medications, we covered what matters most. And maybe there's another one we can add is money. I'll have to ask the geriatricians if they're willing to make room in their textbooks for an extra M, but money absolutely matters a lot. So thank you so much. No? Oh, I thought you were going to hear the cane on the opposite.
Dr. Patel is not done, but you have 15 minutes if you want to get your blood pressure taken. So if you decide to get up and do so, please do it quietly. Please don't talk to other people because Dr. Patel is here for 15 more minutes to either talk to you or answer questions. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What does the medical profession do about the onset of dementia?
So going back to that other hand, mentation, the mind, right? What can the medical professionals do about dementia? We think a lot about brain health. In this room, I'm sure. We don't have a choice. Whether we want to admit it or not, we're all thinking sometimes about brain health. How many of us have a friend or a family member who struggles a little bit with memory? Yeah, well, we all do, right? How many of us see struggles with memory or the mind, interfering with things that matter most, like being independent, or even things like mobility. A lot of times people stop driving because they have some event that happens because they forgot. They lose their confidence, right? So brain health and memory, both dementia, which is more of a diagnosis, as well as mood. Because if we're not positive, I think I remember the comment made earlier, if we're not happy, it turns out when we feel depressed later in life, the number one symptom of depression later in life is actually memory loss. So a lot of patients who are starting to experience depression, they won't come in saying, hey, I'm sad, or I'm tearful. They'll say that I can't remember it. And we think right away, dementia, Alzheimer's, but sometimes it's something else happening in the brain. It also turns out that infections, as we get older, can start to make us feel confused. It could be an infection in the bladder, but we wake up confused in the morning. It's a strange thing how the mind requires the whole body to work really well. And I'll be honest, if our finances aren't in order and we're stressed about our money, then we're not going to think well. So brain health is absolutely critical. What can we do about that? Number one, as a medical professional, it's my job to create strong, healing, trusted relationships so people can tell me what they're experiencing. There's a lot of shame sometimes in the symptoms we feel. And that shame is very understandable, but it makes it hard for people to address the issues they're facing, right? That's number one, I'd say. Number two, something that we're very proud of at Bettina, is we engage with our loved ones. We engage with the loved ones of our patients. So our patients are our customers, if you will. If you think of medicine as a business, which, it doesn't always need to be. But our other customer is the loved one. It's the spouse, or it's the adult child. And when we talk to the patients and their loved ones, and remember, we do a lot of video, so over a video call, it's easy for the daughter in Pittsburgh to join a visit because it starts on time and it ends on time. And so she can just take her lunch break to join mom or dad's medical visit. A lot of times that's where we learn and really start to speak openly about some of the issues that you're describing around memory or dementia or things like that. And then last, what we can do is take a cue from our nursing colleagues and think about the environment. If someone's struggling with memory, how can we make their life better? I'd love to make their memory better. There's some things we can do about that. We can take away medicines that are hurting the memory. We can treat some conditions that might be affecting the memory. But sometimes we can't change that. What we can do is make a plan, right? How are we going to stay independent at home? How are we going to continue to be active socially, if that's what matters to you? How are we going to continue to exercise, if that's what matters to you? Despite some challenges in memory that many of us are going to face as we get older. Just because we can't change it doesn't mean we can't accommodate and work hard together to focus on doing all the things that we all need to do every day to be healthy and to be successful. Right? We, of course, can refer. We can do imaging of the brain if need be. We can send our patients to neurologists or to different kinds of therapists that can help. As patients, I don't like to talk about this always, it's not a pleasant topic, but some of our patients with memory loss need a facility to live in, right? We can recommend a plan for that. Is there a facility or a way of living that's better? These are all different things that, based on an individual's problems and how they're experiencing memory loss at all, we can manage it. And then lastly, we can measure. So there are some tests we can do. A little bit like, they almost feel like puzzles, but there have been medical tests that we do. We sit down with people and we ask them to go through certain things that help us to track how their mind is doing over time. So if things are changing, we're not relying only on stories. Oh, this thing happened, so maybe it'll worse. Well, let's do a test. Let's sit down and spend half an hour, go through, one of the tests is called MOCA, M-O-C-A. Let's do another MOCA and see if the score is actually going down. And you'd be surprised, a lot of times people get really upset about their memory because something happens, but when we do the test, it turns out their memory is actually a little better than it was a year ago. And it's so reassuring, because when mistakes happen, we don't always know. Is it because of something happening in my brain, or is it just a bad day, right? And so we can use some tests and data to help people to navigate their own health as they experience changes in brain health over time. Does that answer your question, sir? Great. Yes, sir, in the back.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about a rich spiritual life as it relates to successful aging.
Yeah, it's a great question. The question is if we can think about a rich spiritual life as it relates to aging successfully. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, what we find is that in my practice, sometimes we ask directly about spirituality and religion, and a lot of you are used to that clipboard that you might fill out when you see a new doctor, and somewhere buried in the middle of page 2, sometimes it does ask about religion and things like that. It's important to ask those questions. The other way we cover these things is just by listening and asking questions. What matters most? If people tell me that their spirituality matters most, or going to church, or volunteering with their church matters a lot. What we find is that spiritual practice can help with so many things. It can help with the social world that some people value and need help with, or who really are quite successful with. For others, spirituality and prayer can help with feeling grounded and centered. I've particularly, you know, I mentioned being on call. Every 6th week when I'm on call, sometimes we'll get a call at 9:30 at night. It's usually 9:30 when these calls happen. Nobody wants to call. Nobody wants to bother the doctor at 9:30 at night, right? Or 11 o'clock at night. They're doing it because they're scared. And so we do a couple of things. We'll ask them questions and find out what's going on. Sometimes that fear is very, very justified, and it's not often, but sometimes we'll say, hey, I think we should be getting emergency care right away. We'll coordinate that. More often, now that we know what's going on, we can address it on Monday or tomorrow morning, but we're still left with that fear. And I find myself with patients who have a spiritual practice that we stop and we think, well, what's going to make us feel better? Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's a meditation, maybe it's a breathing exercise. So I find that when I have these relationships with patients and I take the time, I take a breath myself to get centered and I start asking questions, that people's spiritual world or spiritual practice sort of rises to the surface, and often is how we find ourselves either solving problems or feeling better in those times of crisis, when we feel so alone. I tell patients all the time, before I end the call, you're not alone. If things get worse, you call me back. And I also find that if I remind them of their spirituality, they also realize they're not alone, because they're connected to something.
Well, now I have to ask, how has your upbringing, your heritage, your background, your family affected your philosophy of care?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. The question is, how does my background, my heritage, my family affect my philosophy of care? And I'll say it's affected my philosophy of care in every single way. It'd be hard for me, I don't know if I've been asked that before, to think about it. Maybe I'll give you a few quick things that pop in my mind. One, I come from a family where family needs everything. And, you know, I pulled out my phone earlier and talked about how for 20 years I've had a practice. But 20 years I've had this practice as well. And it was actually during COVID that I had a really important insight myself as a doctor, where I realized that in my regular practice, I've got a beautiful office, if I'm lucky, a nice reception or waiting room. I've got all the equipment I needed, and I'm able to help people, and I was very proud. But I also realized, well, I had this other practice that was just living on my phone with my aunts and uncles, and often my cousins, who would call me on their way home from a specialist that they brought their mom to, right? In Arizona, a lot of family in Arizona or California. And that's where it came together. Because during COVID, my real practice became all about video and conversation and text messaging. And I realized, well, these aren't so different. If my patients trust me and I'm kind, that I'll listen and I'll help them make good decisions for themselves. Well, that's what I've been doing for my family all these years. Right? So that's number one, that we're just sort of a tight-knit group of people. And sometimes I think you ask about my heritage, maybe that's because we're immigrants, but I know it's not. I know so many people, all different heritage, whether they've been here for one generation or 100. Certain families have that core value, right? That's one. The second is, you know, it's a sort of stereotype. You know, people who look like me or have my last name, they all come from convenience stores. We often run small businesses and motels, right? And so my family, I told you they're not all doctors. Very few of us in my family have even college degrees, but lots of entrepreneurs, lots of small business owners. And one thing I learned from being part of that family is that business is just another way that I can help patients get what they need, right? So my textbook is a way that I can help patients get what they need. Picking up the phone and calling a pharmacist and saying, hey, this is Dr. Patel, this is one way to get the patients what I need. But if I think about it the way my family encouraged me to, is that, hey, if you think about the money and how things work, well, then you can help your patients better. You can create a practice where people have fewer patients so they can listen better, they have more time. You can create a practice where we save room every day for sick patients, and we don't just book ourselves solids. So when people call us that morning, we have an appointment we need, right? So all these considerations, I've partnered with Dr. Here's my friend Jack Stoddard, he's my partner in this, and sort of represents the business side as well. But I've learned that if I learn a little bit about business as a doctor, I can really put my practice to work for my patients. That's another sort of value or sort of a practice that came from my family. Although I'll confess, when I was a young doc, I wanted nothing to do with business at all. And nothing to do with it at all. I thought it was the enemy. I thought medicine should be pure. It should be about doctor, patient, nurse. And I learned pretty quickly that that was a little bit naive. You know, that I should be thinking about business so my patients get what they need. That's another thing that my sort of family affected me. And maybe the last thing is that I grew up taking natural remedies that my grandma would. She would add cold, there would be a cup of milk that was warm, there'd be honey, and there would be turmeric. It all got stirred together, and I would pinch my nose and I would break it down. And I learned just, I don't know if I learned a lot of herbalism, I'm not really an herbalist per se, but I learned how important it is, and how there's some wisdom in sort of the grandma class that maybe didn't make it to my textbook that I should support. So when patients tell me that they have a medical remedy that they love, or that they have something in their body that is going to help them with their arthritis, I learned how to be really respectful and supportive to some kinds of help. So maybe those are three different things that come from my own family background. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you all for the questions you asked and the expertise you shared with me on aging successfully. I've learned a great deal today. Hopefully you learned a thing or two as well. But I'm really grateful. We're happy to come back to talk about brain health, to talk about mobility, to talk about any of these topics in more depth if you like. I'm happy to come back myself for sense with my even smarter, more expert teammates to come talk to you all. I'm just grateful for the time you spent with us this morning. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Patel, to the Mendoza group, that's the group that put the breakfast together and did all the hard work. If you would like another barista coffee, or if you like